shall be that as a wandering bird cast out of the nest, so the daughters of Moab shall be at the fords of Arnon. Take counsel, execute judgment, make thy shadow as the night, in the midst of the noonday, hide the outcast, bewray not him that wandereth, let mine
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing in the book of Isaiah. We're in chapter 16. And really, this could be considered part of the burden of Moab, because Moab is still the subject. Just going to get my scriptures all lined up here. Yeah, I almost regret ending it, because it's good to have the thought process continue from one chapter to the other. I almost wish we'd ended like at verse 8 or anything. But we had left them, with the threat of the Assyrians, with the negativity, with the various negative consequences that would come upon them. So chapter 16, verse 1, send ye the lamb to the ruler of the land, from Sila to the wilderness, unto the mount of the daughter of Zion. For it shall be, that as a wandering bird cast out of the nest, so the daughters of Moab shall be at the fords of Arnon. Take counsel, execute judgment, make thy shadow as the night in the midst of the noonday. Hide the outcasts, bewray not him that wandereth. Let mine outcast dwell with thee, Moab. Be thou a covert to them from the face of the spoiler, for the extortioner is at an end. The spoiler ceaseth, the oppressors are consumed out of the land. And one more verse. And in mercy shall the throne be established. He shall sit upon it in truth, in the tabernacle of David, judging and seeking judgment, and hasting righteousness. And that's a little messianic foreshadowing there. So, I learned this lamb to be understood as a tribute lamb. The animal, the tribute slaughter. And the idea basically is that they would send a tribute, because the history of Moab, I talked about how Abraham was, I've had other things in my mind. I realize I better share them because you may not have them in your head. Abraham's nephew Lot had two sons, Moab and Ammon. And their names themselves, Moab means of his mother's father, and Ammon means inbred or something. And that's what it said in my Strong's Concordance when I looked it up years ago. I'm not looking it up today. And we're not even talking about Ammon anyways. So Moab was one of these two brothers of this inbreeding, and they were at times in conflict with Israel, but because they were considered kinsmen, when Israel came to take the land, to take the land of Israel back, or not back, to take it, not back like the 50 years ago or whatever. I mean, when they went to take the promised land with Joshua, they weren't supposed to touch the land of the Moabites and the Ammonites or of the Edomites, because they were kinsmen and they were not to disturb their their dwellings. They weren't supposed to invade and take away their land. And but they did become subject to Israel under David. David subdued the nations round about. Moab and Israel had conflicts, though, during the periods, during the Judges period. The Moabites participated in the Edomites, and various of the other nations participated in the oppression of Israel. And so there is often some prophecy, even like this. This is not all roses and teacups for Moab. So Moab was a subject people to Israel, especially in the days of David. Now, they rebelled during this time and other times against Israel when they saw them weak. You know, the Moabites, and there was the Moabite Stone is a famous archaeological find, because they didn't really know much about the Moabites until they found, well, they knew what was in the Bible, but they didn't have any external, like, confirmation of a lot of what's said. And finding that stone meant that a lot of what was already in the Bible was confirmed. Obviously, they had a different perspective on the battle. It's interesting. But anyways, the Moabites sometimes were subject to the Israelites. And as subject people, they would pay tribute. And part of that, sometimes I got to think that giving an animal in sacrifice is mostly symbolic. But, you know, if you wanted to show your fealty, you would send it. If you wanted to say you were no longer loyal, you wouldn't send the tribute animal, and it would be taken note of. The tribute, you know, like, it's providing a sacrifice on behalf of someone. It's like a gift. Send the gift from Sila to the wilderness, to the mount of the daughter of Zion. Selah is in Moab. And the wilderness, obviously I go through the wilderness because there's some land separating the two nations. Into the wilderness and up to Jerusalem. And what it's saying, so it says do this, but it's not clear what it means. Well, I think in this context, actually, I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to say it just sits there all by itself. Because what it's saying is, hey, it's going to be in verse 2 that as a wandering bird casts out of the nest, so the daughters of Moab will be at the fords of Arnon. Well, a wandering bird casts out of the nest, a little bird that's been cast out of the nest and is kind of wandering around, that's an extremely vulnerable creature. Baby birds out of their nest are quintessentially vulnerable. And that's what he's comparing the ladies there of Moab to. They're going to be like an unnested bird at the fords of Arnon. Fords are places where rivers are shallow enough to cross while you're just wading on through. You can ford the river by just walking through it. And usually, you know, when you end up at a ford, you're not at the bridge, you're at the fords. Because you have to cross the river to safety. But also, while you're fording a river, you're also vulnerable. Because a lot of times a river that can be forded is not exactly a creek. You know, I mean, it can be quite a significant, you know, you can walk up to your armpits and you're fording the river. A river that can't be forded is one that you simply can't walk across. Anytime you can walk across, or a place in a river that's designated for walking across, is a ford. We got Rockford up here. You know, it means literally there's a place where we could ford the river. The Rock River, actually, so the Rock Ford. You know, that's the big city here. Not much of a city, actually. I grew up in a town about the same size in the Chicago area, where we just call little things like Rockford suburbs. Right. So you're going to be in trouble, is what it's saying. You're going to be in trouble. The daughters of Moab are going to be vulnerable. And so he's saying, okay, that's how you're going to be. You're going to be in a bad situation. So send the lamb. And I got to think, in my mind, this sort of symbolizes pay respect. I mean, it does. I mean, you could almost literally say send the lamb. It means to pay respect. Be respectful. And what? Well, take counsel means you take counsel together and then do the right thing. Make thy shadow as night in the midst of the noonday. Hide the outcasts. Bewray. I believe that means betray, but I'll check it up. I'll check that because it's honestly, it's one of those cases. Ray. Yeah, it's funny. I assume it's betray, but it's not like a misspelling. It's an archaic word. I mean, in English we have archaic words. and Betray is probably just an archaic form of something. Huh. Yeah. It sounds just like betray, except different. Betray means to reveal, divulge. There you can see it. One more? So we can get it in there. Oh, it won't fit. There we go. To reveal, divulge, or make something known, disclose. Transitive means goes back. To reveal or disclose, to show, or it goes to a. Transitive means it takes a direct object. All right. To reveal or disclose means it's got to disclose something. It's not just to disclose, and without any object. To disclose and show the presence or true character of, especially if unintentionally or incidentally. Now that's what the dictionary definition of the English word betray is. It means to reveal. So it doesn't necessarily mean to betray. Like betray, you can reveal someone and betray them, but you can reveal without betraying. I wonder, it doesn't say anything about connotation, whether it's implicitly negative. I mean, if betray is a lot like, meaning that betray is a lot like betray. If that's the case, then they are pretty much synonymous, and maybe they're just different forms of the same thing. 16. Let me just hear. I prefer to do this like this. Me rail on him that wandereth. There we go. Betray is gala, to uncover. Yeah. So we could use the word betray there, but we would mean it in that sense that betrayal means to betray my presence. But betray means to sort of indicate to someone, I don't know, betray and betray are actually sound pretty similar to me, huh? So let's move on. And so he's basically saying, hey, let my outcasts. See, the children of Israel are coming under assault by the Assyrians. And there are going to be people carried away captive. There are also going to be people fleeing for their lives. And some will flee to the neighboring nations. And what he's saying is, my people are going to be fleeing. And this is happening first. You got to take counsel. Think about it real hard. Let your shadow be as the night. This is another metaphor. Shadow be as the night. The idea of a shadow is used often in the Bible in terms of protection because they do live in a very arid climate. There's deserts and stuff. And the importance of shadows to protect from heat is very important. To find shade from the exposure to the sun. As we know how dangerous the sun is. Even then, they were seeking shelter from it. They didn't understand the radiation and all that stuff, but they did understand it was hot and they needed to get out of it. And we're saying, you be like the shadow a shadow of night in the midst of the day. Like as the daytime shadows are not like the nighttime shadows. Nighttime shadows are cool and quiet and different. But the daytime shadows are much warmer, even though marginally better than being in the direct sunlight, right? Well, he's saying, hey, protect them. Give them the utmost protection. Be as gracious as you can. Israel is the former, tribute ruler of Moab. And so they have a lot of bitterness potentially towards them. In fact, they did rebel against them on a number of occasions. So, they might be tempted. But what he's saying is, hey, listen. You're going to be in the same position. The daughters of Moab are going to be at the fords of Arnon. And let's say you'll want their prayers answered. So, let thy shadow be as the night. Let thy shadow be as the night in the midst of the day. Not a shadow of night, but a shadow as the night. The night is a much better shadow than whatever you're getting in the field at noonday. So hide the outcasts. Hide those people who are fleeing for their lives. Hide them. We'll give them a place to shelter. Betray, not him that wandereth. Don't reveal those that are wandering away from Israel. They come in like wanderers. They're not really wandering, but it seems like they're wanderers. They're wandering away from the devastation and destruction. They may be in a bit of a daze, actually, so it's not such a far-fetched idea that they would wander into Moab. So that's the idea. And in a sense, I think what it's saying is this is your tribute. You know what I mean? Like, pay tribute again is what he's saying, because you're going to need the help. You're going to be in a position where you and your people are hurting and you want God or whatever, but it doesn't say that, but that's the essential idea. It suggested, hey, pay your tribute. Let your shadow be as night. Give them relief. Give them security. Don't berate them. That's what you should do. Let my outcast dwell with thee. Be thou a covert to them from the face of the spoiler, for the extortioner is at an end. Again, extortioner, we think of extortion very specifically. I think of like a mobster going like, hey, pay up. Well, actually, extortion, technically. Well, let's just do a little bit. I kind of know what extortion means, but it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I forgot to switch back that whole time. I assume does that work? I guess that kind of works, doesn't it? I can just work like this, even though it's weird to have that second window there. Okay. A criminal extorts money from someone by threatening to expose embarrassing information about them. Blackmailer, extortionist. That's weird, because that's not the only way you extortion. That's one extortion. You can just be a threat of violence. Yeah, here's a better definition. Someone who uses the act of violence, threats, intimidation, or pressure. All those things. That's all extortion, yes. To force someone to hand over money for something else, to do something they don't want to. Yeah, extortion is to pressure someone through violence and other means, or threats of violence, or threats of whatever kind of intimidation and all that. I'm curious. What are the pigeons saying? What about other words for extortioner? It's just synonyms, really? Okay, whatever. So in the Hebrew, though, the word here for extortioner, and the one who spoils. Well, spoiler. I usually think of, most of my childhood, I thought of spoil as something that happened to fruit. You know what I mean? Or food would get spoiled. And to me, spoil meant something like that, like it got spoiled, it went bad. It was a new use for me to understand spoil as to despoil, like to take from. Word origin. Oh yeah, this is one that means from a primitive root to press, that is figuratively to oppress or extort. So it's kind of a general word. It's not specifically extortion, but look at in all the in the international interlinear they go extortioner. No, interesting. You notice though in this version, for has come the extortioner has ceased destruction. Huh. I'm not gonna mess with it. I think it's too much. It's tempting to get into that and try to ferret out from the Hebrew a more subtly proper way to translate, but it just doesn't seem valuable enough. The exact nature of spoiler extortioner doesn't really matter. Because they're evildoers. We know what the Assyrian's doing. He extorts. He takes tribute. He threatens with violence, and they have to comply. And if they don't, well, he'll come and sack their cities and take them away captive, and there's nothing they can do about it because he is big and powerful and will do as he wills, and God has given him to do so because He was not pleased with his people. In fact, oppressors, though, there are 3 words here, I think. We have spoiler. I just want to see if the words are the same. That's always more interesting to me. Like, if we have here extortioner, Moots, spoiler is shadad, to deal violently with, to despoil or devastate. And then the spoiler over here is showed, different. This right here, this word is not the same as spoiler. Okay. They seem similar. They're shadad and showed. 7701 and shadad is 7703. They must be related. They're so close in the concordance. The spoiler ceases the oppressors, ramak, which means in the quick definition. I'm just using the quick definitions. You can follow along if you go over to Bible Hub. Ramak means to trample at its root. But obviously it means like a trampler, or one who subjects people to trampling down. And, again, it's a lot like oppression. A lot of the words are maybe overblown, but it has to do with a broader sense of general injustice towards the people. So let's go back to our text here. So we have, several different words there for evildoers. And the thing is, they are consumed. He's saying, do this because you know why? The extortioner is an end. The spoiler ceases. The oppressors. And honestly, I thought this meant the king of Assyria, but actually, I think he's referring to the bad kings of Israel. Because, the Moabites see the kings as oppressive. Of course, they'd rather rule themselves. That isn't to say that sometimes subject people didn't benefit under the rule of an external power. Sometimes an external power rules over you, and it's beneficial. I mean, like the Romans. If you've ever seen the movie, what was it? The Life of Brian. It's considered generally irreverent, so I'm not recommending it per se. I don't recommend it to children or the feeble-minded, but it's an interesting comedy. I didn't see it when I was young because it was considered too. My dad wouldn't have liked something like that, too irreverent, especially at that time. But I look at it now and I appreciate it from a totally different perspective. It is a satire not just of the Bible and of the New Testament, but of more so, it's a satire of Christians. If you watch that movie, it's not about making fun of Jesus. I remember even the guys who made it didn't really think they were being disrespectful towards Jesus. And in fact, as you watch the movie, they're definitely not. Not towards Jesus himself, for sure. But towards Christians and Christianity, yes. It's very disrespectful. But it's an interesting critique. And if you look at it like that, and you look at it as yourselves, and not them making fun of God, but making fun of men, because it is more of a making fun of men thing. And anytime atheists talking about God, they're really making fun of men because they don't believe in God. That's fires in their mind. Okay, so I brought that out for. Hold on. Let me have a sip of coffee. I'm remembering now. That's good. So, they had been under the oppression of the kings of Israel, and of necessity wouldn't generally like that. Most people don't like being ruled over. But in that movie, like the Life of Brian, which is a profane movie, but I like the part where they talk about there's a part I like. There are many funny parts. There's one part where they talk about what did the Romans ever do for us. They're talking about how they can't stand they want to throw off the Roman oppression because there's a group of Jewish zealots and they want to throw off the Romans. And it's funny because they make them use kind of Nazi type word. I mean, it's a very I don't know. A lot of Christians probably don't like it, but I think it's a very stunning sort of critique. And I find it useful when people make fun of you. You should listen. I mean, I've had people mock me, and I realize that's me. That's how people see me. I mean, it's a very unkind characterization, but it's probably how I'm seen. You know, like when I've had people mock my singing, and I'm like, well, that's probably how I sound to people. You know, if I hadn't gotten over it ages ago, gotten over whatever reluctance I had about my, the sound of my own voice. If I hadn't gotten over that, maybe I'd be sensitive about that critique, but I'm not. So, what did the Romans ever do for us? They're like, well, nothing. They said, well, there's the roads and the aqueduct and this and that. And that. And they do all this stuff and they provide peace. And other people are getting angry, like, what? Because they don't want to be ruled over them, period. Over by them. Whether they bring roads or aqueducts, who cares? If the British brought the railway to India and brought modern, I've talked to people from India. They don't care that colonialism had benefits. There are benefits of colonialism. Simple and true. Of course there are. But people don't want them. They want their own self-rule, and I respect that. But still, there is a benefit. You know what I mean? And not everyone hates it. Some people there were, a minority, like when the British ruled over India in colonialism, there were some Indians who benefited greatly from that relationship, for sure. And maybe they wouldn't have benefited under the Mughals or whatever. I forgot exactly what was directly preceding that. Was it the Mughals and then right into that? My Indian history is very terrible, so forgive me. I mean, it's gonna be, I have like this big, my different parts of history for me are like oil paintings. My Indian history is like a 3-year-old's finger painting. So there's some color there, but not a lot. Sorry. Makes you want to go back and study world history again. It's been a long time. It'd be fun to study I've never studied world history from the perspective of like going into each country and doing like in-depth on the history of each country. That'd be amazing. I love history. I mean, I love the subject, Even if that doesn't mean I'm great at it. I just like it, So all these things come to an end, and they're saying. So I don't know if we're talking about the Assyrian coming in here, because he's saying he's still threatening. He's like, let the time. I think when I taught this last time, I taught it wrong. I think I did. Well, that's okay. Every once in a while, that happens. But anyways, the Assyrian doesn't really fit here because they're coming yet. This is a prophecy. They're going to come, and let the outcasts of Israel dwell with you, because you're going to need the good karma, so to speak. So to speak. Meaning having done good, God will be more inclined to do good to you. But if you if you reveal them and are a general stinker about the whole thing, betraying them to the Assyrians, you can rest assured that when you cry out to God, there will be no response for you. To the mercy. God is, if you want mercy, show mercy. That's God's thing. He's like, hey, show mercy. And when you ask for it, I'll tell you what, if you show mercy to people and then you ask for mercy, God will see that and look at you and be a lot more inclined. Because he is a just God. For the extortioner is at an end. Okay. So I think this can be, instead talking about, the extortioner could be a bad king of Israel. Because some of them exacted tribute. I mean, most of them did, actually. But if the tribute is too excessive, they can. A lot of times, when you have a kingdom, like the Romans, like Jesus asked them, who do they tax? Their own citizens? No, they who do the Romans get tribute from? Their subject people or the citizens? Their own children or from strangers? And he's like, the children of strangers. He's like, well, then the children are free. Well, because he was suggesting, it's like, hey, I'm a child of Rome. So why should I pay taxes? But even so, he paid them. He was saying that there was something illegitimate about calling them strangers of Rome because they belonged to Rome. It was an interesting take. Because it is a sense that it was a sense of aren't we all Roman citizens who are born under Rome's rule? like in a sense, is not Rome our father as far as in the world? You know, I mean, like, is not that our collective nation? Yeah, he was in Israel, but Rome was the government. And so you have an oppressive, extortionist type regime over you, and that's gone. Why? Because the Assyrian has come. And look, and you're saying, hey, look, you can afford to be gracious. Because, the oppression of Israel is not about every Israelite. The people who wander in aren't necessarily the oppressors and the extortioners you hate. They're just regular people. But people are like this, like, oh, a black man hurt my family. The first black guy I see, I'm going to hurt him. I mean, people are like that. The first time I'm about to release a song. I'm on the final mixing phases. I have this one song, and it's a very hard song to mix. And, in it, I talk about my ancestor, whose father was scalped by Indians. And so he went and found an Indian. I don't know if it was the Indian. I don't know anything about it, honestly. From my understanding, he just killed Indians or an Indian. Probably in the act of war. I don't think he went out and just murdered somebody. But the idea was that, because we were fighting Indians. Obviously, if your father gets scalped, there's a little bit of conflict. So there would be some fighting. And so when he killed an Indian, he skinned him and had his skin made into a wallet. And that's how sometimes people feel. Like it wasn't necessarily even the Indian that killed his father, but he killed an Indian, and that was good enough. That kind of stood in. I got one of them, and they got one of mine, and I took one of them. So it's easy. Oh, the Israelites are in trouble? They're in need? Well, that's interesting, And then they come, they're all helpless, and they turn them in or mistreat them or send them on their way or turn them away at the border of Moab. Whatever. Because the next part is also a warning. In mercy shall the throne be established, and he shall sit upon it in truth, in the tabernacle of David, judging and seeking judgment and hastening. The throne will be, see, the Moabites know about the throne of David. David's the one who put them into tribute to Israel. And we're saying, hey, look the throne will be established again. It'll be established in mercy, because you be merciful, because the throne of David is established in mercy. And he will sit upon truth in David's in the tent of David, meaning underneath the umbrella of David's family line, the lineage of David, judging, and also the place of David in Jerusalem, obviously, in the same place where his throne was set up. Judging. This king's got to judge. Seeking judgment. What should I judge? You mean sometimes you don't know what the judgment ought to be. And you got to seek it out. You got to pray. You have to think. You have to meditate. You got to use some wisdom to seek judgment. Notice, judging and seeking judgment. They're two different things. Because there's the known and the unknown. Sometimes you know right and wrong. Judge it. Sometimes it's not obvious what's right and wrong, so look into it further until you find the right answer. Or something that is a close approximation. And hastening righteousness. Not just, fostering righteousness, promoting righteousness, bringing about righteousness more quickly. You know what I mean? That's what kings should do. That's what government should do. They should encourage good behavior. And good habits. They try. I mean, this is something understood among people who are scholars of things like policy and stuff, that incentives. Like in our country, I'm going to digress very slightly here to current events. In our country, we're doing the exact opposite. We're hasting unrighteousness. We're creating incentives to unrighteousness. For example, we had the pandemic, right? And people had to take work off, because they told them they couldn't work. And the employers complied. They didn't all have to do that. They could have just kept working, but people went along with it. So, like I said, we fall, like in my song, we fall on our swords for you. Whatever you say, we'll do it. Well, just, you say so, Governor, and I'll fall on my sword. What do you want? How would you like me dead? How would you like me skewered? Through the belly? Through the chest? How would you like it? Just tell me how, you want me to jump? How high? And they hasted unrighteousness in this way. They told everyone to stop working, and then they paid them more to not work. They give them more money to not work than they did to work. Now me, I'm self-employed. You know what I got for losing my business? Nothing. Nothing. I mean, I got the stimulus payments. Yeah, that's cool. I'm just saying though, people getting an extra $600 a week. I mean, I didn't get an extra $0 a week. I didn't make $600 a month during the pandemic. Week. I made maybe $600 a month. They took all my business away. Not all of it. I mean, but we had projects that were literally canceled right from under us. And then they pay people not to work. Well, that's an incentive that's gonna haste not working. That's opposite of hasting righteousness. Hasting righteousness would be helping people do the right thing. I understand when people have to take off work, you supply them with their losses. But they made it so good not to work. And I didn't get to ride this gravy train, man. I would have loved to. Can you imagine? I haven't made $600 a week clear in a long time. Well, $600, no, that's about what I make. That's about what I make, okay? Actually, well, last year. We have heard of the Pride of Moab. There I go again, revealing my personal details. I guess I just don't care. I always say, it's like, I guess I'm determined that my enemies will have no surprises against me. That I'll be a so thoroughly self-denounced individual that by the time the enemy catches up with me, there'll be nothing left to say bad about me. We have heard of the Pride of Moab. I got nothing more to say about that. Listen, there's going to be a king. The message is, hey, there's going to be a king in Israel again, so you better be nice to my outcasts. Because the throne's going to be established. He's going to sit on in truth. He's going to judge. He's going to seek judgment and haste righteousness. And you are not really particularly set to come out good in that. It's a threat. It's a warning. Send the lamb. Continue to pay tribute. And you can pay tribute in this manner. Hide my outcasts. Because the throne of David is coming back, and you better believe it. That's what the message is. The throne of David is coming back, and you better believe it. Because David is the one who put them in tribute. That's why he's mentioned. And of course this feels very messianic, doesn't it? We hear the name of Jesus. I read this verse and I say, Amen, Lord Jesus, because that's who we're speaking of, right? But of course, in their time, they were speaking of the successors of Ahaz. Remember, out of the serpent's root shall come forth the cockatrice, out of the cockatrice's root shall come forth the fiery flying serpent. In the sense that Hezekiah, that fiery flying serpent, is also Jesus in a sense. He is the fiery flying serpent. Why? Well, as the serpent must be lifted up in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, it says. It's like serpent is usually, here's an interesting thing. Usually the serpent refers to the devil. You know what I mean? But not always. And it's not always an evil thing, right? We think of the serpent as the devil, but not every single instance, like the serpent on the brass pole. They looked at it. It's always been a bit of a thing that people will pause at because it is a strange thing. The brass serpent on the pole. But the thing is, as the serpent represents wisdom and craft, I mean, God has these things too, and Satan merely has the wisdom and craft of God, but in his own way, in an evil way. And by craft is not a bad thing to have. There's different ways of looking at craft. Like crafty has a negative indication, but craft in terms of power or ability is not. But let's just stop behaving like a dribble glass. So, so I'm just recapturing my thought where I was. The throne of David. Just to wrap up before I go to the next section, oh, Jesus. Yeah. Jesus will sit on the throne of David. He is enthroned in David's stead. Like, he sits on the throne of David because he is David's heir. There's no actual literal throne that he has to sit on. I mean, there may have been a throne, but there's no, like, the throne of David refers to the kingship itself. You know what I mean? Like the throne of England isn't referring to the actual throne in the hall. There is a throne, but it can refer to that, but it can also refer to like we would say, the crown of England. Now, I don't mean the thing in Buckingham Palace, the crown jewels. I mean the royal family or the royal personage, because oftentimes they'll refer to the king as simply the crown. Because the crown is a symbol of power which represents the king. So Jesus also, on the throne of God, is also on the throne of David, and has received the crown. Already in his exaltation, he is exalted and sitting upon the throne of David in the heavens. Now he must yet rule in earth. It's not enough. We see not all things put under his feet. Therefore it remains that all things must be put under his feet. That is for certain. We know that he must rule. I thought I was going to say more. I was thinking about, I thought I had another idea, but I lost track of it. It's okay. We've heard of the Pride of Moab. Well, now here's this is kind of like, notice it's we. That's almost like a royal we. And it's given here right after talk. It's almost like this is the judgment of the king now. The king is, what it's saying is, pay tribute, continue to pay tribute to Israel in this way. Do not bewray the outcasts, because the king is coming back. And we already know things about Moab. We know about you, Moab. You have sins, is what he's saying. You have sins. You have reason to fear the judgment beyond just do the right thing. I mean, there is the whole do the right thing, right? But there's also you done the wrong thing. And you might be cruising for a bruising, as I say. We've heard of the pride of Moab. He is very proud, even of his haughtiness and his pride and his wrath. But his lies shall not be so. So I guess we're gonna. What I think that means, we've heard of his pride, his haughtiness, his pride, mentioned twice, his wrath, but his lies. So, in other words, he's proud. Okay, we've heard how proud he is. And haughty, right? And his wrath. But his lies shall not be so. Well, in pride, oftentimes people lie. Like, I'm the biggest, strongest, toughest guy in this town. You know what I mean? I knew a guy. It's funny because when you're in wrestling and stuff, every once in a while you get people who get some, I just coach, and I was never much of a wrestler. I mean, I wasn't terrible. I just wasn't top tier or nothing by any measure of the imagination. Just a kid wrestling around. And I was awkward at my when I was young anyway, so I was too tall. Always wrestling kids like 6 inches short of me. It always seemed they had about 6 more years of experience too. Well, so I still coach wrestling, but you get people who are guys who, some people are insecure about their, they want you to think they're fighters, and they're tough, and they want, and if you're a big guy, they want you to know that. Sometimes people, I get the sense of people trying to impress me, sometimes, and some people. And sometimes they'd lie. And remember when I was a kid, I used to believe a lot of the nonsense people would tell me. Like, I went into the city and I beat up a bunch of guys and blah, blah, blah. This stuff is just nonsense. Well, Moab too. He's so proud. He's so boastful. He's so haughty, right? And we've heard of we've heard of his pride and his boasting, but his lies. I mean, like, let's say Moab says, "I won first prize in the fishing contest, and I am the biggest, whatever, the biggest, baddest in town, and whatever." Just a bunch of I never heard any of that. That's funny. I never heard Moab was the biggest, baddest, and I never heard Moab was, what was the other thing I said? I forgot. Never heard of that. Didn't hear how you won the race. Didn't hear how you helped the widows. Didn't hear how you saved the orphans. Didn't hear none of that. I think that's the idea. We've heard you're famous for your pride. You're not famous for your lies. Meaning, people lie about themselves. Like, I'm the best in the world. And like, oh, look at here. On the news I saw last night, he's the best. It's famous. See, Moab's famous for his pride and haughtiness, but not for the things he lies about. How smart he is. I could lie and say, I'm just the smartest person in the world. And like, I'm mostly known for being proud and a big mouth. But I'd like people to know me as the smartest guy in the world. But nope, they don't. My lies do not have the same status as my sins. My other sins. My other sins are greater. I may be known as a liar, but my lies are not known. And I think that's what it means. That's how I read it. How shall his lies be not so? Well, according to all his pride dictates. Because in their pride, like in chapter 14, remember when Satan says, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I'm going to do all these things. It's my pride speaking, but I'm saying lies. I'm not going to be like the Most High. I'm not going to no, yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, is what it says. You imagine yourself exalted into heaven, but you will be brought to hell. And same thing with Moab. They're full of pride, and self-exaltation, and so lifted up and so arrogant. But his lies are not going to be like he thinks. Therefore shall Moab howl for Moab, even everyone shall howl, all those of Moab. For the foundations of Kir-Hareseth shall ye mourn. Surely they are stricken. For the fields of Heshbon languish. The vine of Sibmah, the lords of the heathen have broken down the principal plants thereof. They have come even to Jazer. They wandered through the wilderness. Her branches are stretched out. They are gone over the sea. Therefore I will bewail with the weeping of Jazer, the vine of Sibmah. I will water thee with my tears, O Heshbon and Elilah, for the shouting of thy summer fruits, and for thy harvest is fallen, and gladness is taken away, and joy out of the plentiful field. And in the vineyards there shall be no singing, neither shall there be shouting. The treaders shall tread out no wine in their presses. I have made their vintage shouting to cease. I forgot which of those words is in italics. Is it vintage or shouting? I think it's their vintage. And the shouting put for the whatever. It's obvious. That's a decent translation to me. So we've heard of the pride of Moab. They're full of pride. It's not going to be so. And so because, all the things he boasts of, they're not true. And it's not going to come to pass the way he says. And so he's going to weep and howl for himself because of what's really going to happen. He's going to howl for himself. Because there's no one else going to be to howl for him, is what it's saying. For the foundation of Kir-Hareseth shall you mourn. The cities, whatever this city, Kir-Hareseth, Kir-Hareseth, meaning... Sorry, I don't know why I keep doing this. That's why I know. Let's see. Oh, Kirasheth, verse 7. Sorry, I should just do this up on the screen, huh? Kitcheres or Kircharasath. Wall of Earthenware, a fortified city in Moab. From Kiri, fortress, and Cheres, fortress of earthenware. Who want earthworks? Very creative name. So obviously they just, they weren't very creative in their names. For the foundations of the foundation wall of the what was it? The pottery wall, whatever. Not pottery, but earthenware. Your earthworks are stricken. Because a lot when you trust in a wall to protect you, when you make something to protect you, or a house, the foundation is very important. Very important. It's everything. I have a bad foundation in my kitchen. The whole part of the building is sloped significantly, like several degrees of slope on that floor, and it gets worse as you get to the corner. It's just been that way since I moved here. Because when they built it, they didn't make the footing deep enough, or they did something wrong. The whole thing sank. Foundations are important. It says, if the foundations be destroyed, what will the righteous do? They mourn for the foundations because the foundations represent the basis of their trust. They built the wall to protect them. That which they had relied upon for their protection fails, so they mourn the foundations of their wall as they are torn up and their defenses stripped away. For the fields of Heshbon languish. There's a sort of languishing. Languish usually means to droop or wilt. I'll check it out real quick. Languish, just because the word, languish, I'm not got a sense of what it means in English. It means to be weak or languish. That's fine. There's another word that means to wilt or droop that's sometimes translated languish. The fields of Heshbon, another, obviously the reason we talk about fields languishing is because maybe they had previously flourished. Maybe this is a plentiful field. It seems to be, because of what it talks about is their plentiful fields being turned into wilderness. The fields of Heshbon, the walls will mourn because they're going to mourn for the walls. The walls are going to be broken down. They're going to mourn for the fields because the fields are going to be stripped clean. All the work you put in the past year, the harvest is going to be stolen by the Assyrians. Or it could be looking forward to the Babylonians. I'm not sure exactly on that front. But they are in danger. That's the clear thing. It's like, because trouble comes to you eventually too. And that's the thing is, like, in life, trouble will eventually come to you. You're going to eventually need forgiveness. We all do. It's important. How we forgive is important. And how we receive forgiveness is important too. Because, I was talking the other day about how, it can be, sometimes we do things, we sin in word or deed. And the repercussions can last days, weeks, years, and in different parts. And it can be very tempting. As a Christian, I think we want to be forgiven. We want, like Jesus, that instant satisfaction. Human beings sometimes is not so easy. They sometimes, it's not a question of forgiving. I can forgive something, but there can be things that happen that make changes that forever change. Like if I say something unkind to someone, maybe I don't even mean it, but or I just say a few unkind words or a few ill-chosen words, I don't have to mean them for them to have an effect on that person. Just hearing them, because maybe they already believe it. Maybe they have a hang-up. And maybe someone's got some sort of physical deformity, right? And I mention it and make fun of it. Or I mention it in passing in a way that's insensitive, but not meant to be insulting, but it can hurt. Regardless of our intention, we can hurt people. And then those wounds can last. And here's the thing. It's not on them, per se. If I've sinned against someone, it's not on them to get over it as quickly as possible. You know what I mean? Forgiveness is not the same as getting over it. It's not the same as, for example, in the New Testament, it talks about the qualifications for a bishop. He should be the husband of one wife. It doesn't mean that a man with like many divorces can't be a Christian. It just means he can't be a bishop. It doesn't mean he's not forgiven. It just means he can't be a bishop. It means there are consequences sometimes to our actions that we have to live with. And sometimes they're relational, and it can take years to heal it. Because in spite of someone forgiving you and being every bit wanting to go along with that, they can be stuck with leftover emotions and feelings from things that are unrelated or related. It doesn't matter. The point is, when we get forgiven, we also want to when we receive forgiveness, we always need to remember that we've sinned. And if someone's forgiving us, we shouldn't be so demanding. If they're having trouble just getting past, it's not because things can't always just be dropped. Some things change things forever. Here's an example. It's not anybody I know or anything, but it's like, say someone reveals to, like, you're dating a woman and then she reveals to you that she was once a man. You can't go back. Can't go back. Obviously, that's something you can't repent of either. You can't say, well, I'll be a woman again. Okay, well, no, wait a second. So maybe that's not a good example. But I'm just saying, like, people can, like, you're dating some great guy, and then you find out some bad detail about him, and it can permanently change your perception of them. It doesn't mean they can't be forgiven or even loved. It just means maybe they're not the hero you thought they were. And sometimes it's good that those false images disappear, lest we think more of men than is appropriate. The vine of Sila, similarly. The fields languish because they are sacked. The vine also. The fruit is taken away. The lords of the heathen. The nations. The nations round about. I always like the term heathen, because I'm from the I myself am descended from the heathen. They've broken down the principal plants of. And there's something about that. The vine of Sila represents something more. Obviously, there are vineyards in Sila or something, right? And they've broken down the principal plants of vineyards. Often those symbolize more. Remember chapter 5? The vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel. And also when it talks about principal plants of the vineyard, it can mean like the princes and the rulers and the leaders. You know what I mean? And in a vineyard situation, you might be talking about religion, so you might be talking about high priests and that type of thing. So they've come and broken down the principal plants thereof of their, plentiful field, their vineyards. They have they are coming even to Jazer. And we had Jazer before. It just means they've come close to this location. They wander through the wilderness. Her branches are straight. They're gone over the sea. I mean, it's the idea of. I'm not sure who we're referring to. See, they are the heathen. They wandered through the wilderness. They are gone over the sea. Her branches are stretched out. I thought it meant the vine of Sila, maybe? Or Moab in general. Let's just look at it both. If it's Moab in general, then the idea their branches are stretched out speaks to me of exposure. Her branches are all stretched out and spread out. Her cities are all spread out and separated and not able to mutually defend each other. If we're talking about Assyria, her branches are spread out, meaning her army is spreading out and covering all the different parts of the land. They wander through they come to Jazer, and they wander through the wilderness and spread out through the land, pillaging and sacking as they go. Going over the sea. Sometimes the sea can refer to any kind of body of water, even like a wide river. The Sea of the Wilderness and such. And also, it could be the Red Sea, the Dead Sea, the Sea of Galilee. I'm not sure exactly which it means. Or the river, like I said, Jordan. But usually they wouldn't call the river the sea. Unless they're talking about the Dead Sea, which is definitely a sea. Oh, we're out of time. All right, hold on. Okay. All right, so the next verse is, therefore I will bewail with the weeping of Jazer, the vine of Sila. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. So either the Assyrian is spreading out, and crossing over bodies of water. Going over the sea always is a metaphor for going far. I mean, if you're going over the sea, you've crossed a major body of water, and you have spread out to the utmost. That's what that indication is of a great spreading. And then next is like this all comes crashing down, this the breaking it down, and then the weeping over all these things that are destroyed, all these things that are taken away. We'll cover it tomorrow. I don't think I need to wrap it up because I'm probably going to do a slight summary of what we've already talked about as we continue. Thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to being back again tomorrow to continue in the book of Isaiah. Until then, how about this one?
His life shall not be so. Therefore shall Moab howl for Moab, and everyone shall howl for the foundations of Kirasheth. Shall ye mourn? Surely they are stricken. For the fields of Heshbon languish, and the vine of Sila. The heathen have broken down the principal plants thereof. They are come even to Jazer. They wandered through the wilderness. Her branches are stretched out.